The morning alarm buzzed at 5:30 a.m., just like every other day for the past 2 years. Maya slowly opened her eyes, feeling the familiar weight of exhaustion settling in her bones. She had only gotten 4 hours of sleep again, but there was no time to complain. 3 jobs waited for her today, and each one was crucial for keeping her family afloat. She quietly slipped out of bed, careful not to wake her younger brother David, who was sleeping on the couch in their tiny studio apartment. The poor kid had been up until 2 a.m. studying for his medical school exams, and Maya couldn't bear to disturb his precious few hours of rest. She tiptoed to the small kitchen corner and started making coffee with the cheapest instant blend she could find at the grocery store. As the coffee brewed, Maya looked around their cramped living space. The apartment wasn't much to look at, just 400 square feet of worn carpet, peeling paint, and furniture they'd bought secondhand from thrift stores, but it was home, and more importantly, it was all they could afford on her 3 part-time salaries. The rent alone ate up most of her income from her morning cleaning job at the office building downtown. After her first job ended at noon, Maya rushed home to check on their mother, who had been battling diabetes for the past 5 years. The medical bills kept piling up, and the prescription costs seemed to increase every month. Her mother tried to hide how much pain she was in, but Maya could see it in her eyes. The woman who had once been so strong and independent now struggled to even walk to the bathroom without help. "How are you feeling today, Mom?" Maya asked, sitting on the edge of the bed and checking her mother's blood sugar levels. "Oh, I'm fine, sweetheart. Don't worry about me," her mother replied with a weak smile. "You work too hard already." Maya's heart ached every time she heard those words. Her mother had sacrificed everything to raise her and David after their father died in a car accident 6 years ago. Now it was Maya's turn to take care of the family, even if it meant putting her own dreams on hold. By 2 p.m., Maya was at her second job, working as a cashier at a small grocery store in their neighborhood. The pay wasn't great, but every dollar counted. She spent her 8-hour shift scanning barcodes, bagging groceries, and forcing smiles at customers who sometimes treated her like she was invisible. Some days she wondered if this was all her life would ever be, jumping from one low-paying job to another, never getting ahead, never having time for herself. But then she would think about David and how proud she was of him for getting into medical school. He was so smart, so determined to become a doctor and help people. She remembered how excited he was the day his acceptance letter arrived, and how they both cried tears of joy in their little kitchen. That memory kept her going through the toughest days. The grocery store shift ended at 10 p.m., and Maya had just enough time to grab a quick sandwich before heading to her third job. Milano's restaurant was completely different from her other 2 workplaces. Located in the heart of the city's business district, it was the kind of place where people spent more on one meal than Maya made in a week. Walking through the heavy glass doors, Maya always felt like she was entering a different world. The restaurant was elegant in every way. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting warm light over tables covered in crisp white linens. The walls were decorated with expensive artwork, and fresh flowers were arranged in tall vases throughout the dining room. But what always caught Maya's attention was the beautiful black grand piano sitting in the corner near the bar. The piano was gorgeous, a Steinway that probably cost more than Maya would make in 10 years. Its polished surface reflected the chandelier lights, and even from across the room, she could see how perfectly maintained it was. Every night she found herself stealing glances at it while she worked. Remembering a time when music was the most important thing in her life, Maya had started playing piano when she was 7 years old. Her father, who worked as a mechanic during the day, had somehow managed to save enough money to buy her an old upright piano from a church that was closing down. It wasn't fancy, but it was hers, and she loved it more than anything else in the world. For the next 15 years, Maya lived and breathed music. She practiced for hours every day, even when her fingers were sore and her back ached from sitting at the bench. Her piano teacher, Mrs. Chun, said she had natural talent and pushed her to enter competitions. Maya won several local contests and even placed second in a statewide competition when she was 19. The dream had always been to attend Juilliard School of Music in New York City. Maya had worked so hard to prepare for the audition, spending every free moment practicing the most challenging pieces she could find. She had even been accepted and offered a partial scholarship. It felt like all her dreams were finally coming true. But then life happened. Her father's accident changed everything in an instant. Suddenly, Maya found herself responsible for medical bills, funeral expenses, and taking care of her grieving mother and younger brother. The piano that had once brought her so much joy was sold to help pay for her father's medical treatment. The acceptance letter from Juilliard became just a painful reminder of what could have been. Now, 6 years later, Maya worked at Milano's restaurant, serving expensive meals to wealthy customers who didn't even notice her. She had become good at being invisible, at blending into the background while carrying heavy trays and remembering complex orders. The work was hard on her feet, and some customers could be difficult, but the tips were better than her other jobs. Every night she would walk past that beautiful piano, remembering the feel of the keys under her fingers and the way music could make her forget about everything else in the world. Sometimes, when the restaurant was quiet and she was cleaning tables nearby, she would imagine herself sitting at that bench, playing the pieces she used to love. But those were just dreams now, and dreams didn't pay the bills. Maya's manager, Tony, was a good man who understood her situation. He knew she worked multiple jobs and never complained when she looked tired. He also knew about her brother's medical school expenses because Maya had once asked for extra shifts to help cover tuition costs. "You're one of our best servers," Tony would tell her. "Customers like you because you're genuine. You don't put on an act like some of the others." Maya appreciated the compliment, but she knew the truth. She was good at her job because she understood what it meant to struggle, to work hard for every dollar. She treated every customer with respect, even the ones who looked down on her, because she knew that everyone deserved dignity. As she tied her apron and prepared for another busy Friday night shift, Maya had no idea that this evening would be different from all the others. She had no way of knowing that one conversation would change everything, or that the piano she walked past every night would soon become the center of attention for everyone in the restaurant. The dining room was already filling up with the usual Friday night crowd, business executives celebrating deals, wealthy couples on expensive dates, and groups of friends who thought nothing of spending hundreds of dollars on dinner. Maya grabbed her notepad and pen, took a deep breath, and prepared to serve them all with the same professional smile she wore every night. She had bills to pay, a family to support, and dreams to keep buried. Just another night at Milano's restaurant, or so she thought. The Friday evening rush was in full swing when Maya noticed the group of 5 men walking through the front door. They were the type of customers she could spot from across the room: expensive suits, gold watches, and the kind of confidence that came from never having to worry about money. The hostess led them to table 7, one of the premium spots near the piano, and Maya knew she'd be serving them tonight. As she approached their table with menus and water glasses, Maya could already tell this was going to be a challenging table. The man at the head of the group was talking loudly on his phone, ignoring everyone around him. His voice carried across the restaurant as he bragged about some business deal he'd just closed. The other 4 men were laughing and making jokes, clearly having started their evening at another bar before coming to Milano's. "Good evening, gentlemen," Maya said with her professional smile. "Welcome to Milano's. Can I start you off with some drinks tonight?" The man who seemed to be the leader finally got off his phone and looked up at her. He was probably in his early 40s, with perfectly styled hair and a suit that probably cost more than Maya made in 3 months. His eyes were cold and calculating, the kind of look that made Maya feel like he was judging her worth in dollars and cents. "Yeah, we'll take your most expensive bottle of wine," he said, waving his hand dismissively. "And make it quick. We don't have all night." Maya nodded and went to get their wine, but she could hear them talking as she walked away. They were discussing their latest business ventures, dropping names of companies and deals that meant nothing to her but seemed to impress each other. When she returned with the wine, the leader, who she learned was named Blake, from listening to his friends, was in the middle of telling a story about firing someone from his company. The guy thought he was irreplaceable, Blake laughed. But nobody's irreplaceable. That's the first rule of business. Everyone can be replaced. His friends laughed along, but Maya felt a chill run down her spine. She had seen men like Blake before, people who thought their money gave them the right to treat others however they wanted. As she poured their wine, Blake barely acknowledged her presence, continuing his story about how he'd enjoyed firing. The evening went on, and Maya served them their appetizers and main courses. With each glass of wine, Blake became louder and more obnoxious. He started making comments about the restaurant's decor, criticizing everything from the lighting to the music. Maya tried to stay professional, but she could feel her patience wearing thin. "This place used to be something special," Blake announced to his table, his voice carrying to nearby diners. "Now it's just trying too hard to be fancy. Look at that piano over there. It's probably just for show. I bet nobody who works here can even play it." Maya's heart skipped a beat. She was refilling their water glasses when Blake said this, and she couldn't help but glance over at the beautiful Steinway. For just a moment, she imagined herself sitting at that bench, her fingers dancing across the keys the way they used to years ago. Blake noticed her looking at the piano, and his eyes lit up with cruel amusement. "Hey, you!" he called out, snapping his fingers to get Maya's attention. "You've been staring at that piano all night. Do you play?" Maya felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. The conversation at nearby tables stopped as people turned to see what was happening. She could feel dozens of eyes on her, and she wished she could disappear into the floor. I used to play a little," she said quietly, hoping Blake would drop the subject, but Blake's grin only got wider. "A little? That's what I thought. You probably took some lessons in high school, right? Maybe learned chopsticks or Mary had a little lamb?" His friends started laughing, and Maya felt her face getting hotter. She wanted to tell him about her 15 years of training, about the competitions she'd won, about how close she'd come to attending one of the most prestigious music schools in the world. But she also knew that anything she said would only make things worse. "I bet you've never even touched a real piano like that one," Blake continued, pointing at the Steinway. "That's a $100,000 instrument. It's not a toy for amateurs." Other diners were starting to stare now, and Maya could feel the weight of their attention. Some looked sympathetic, others seemed curious about what would happen next. The restaurant's usual sophisticated atmosphere was being disrupted by Blake's loud voice and cruel laughter. "You know what?" Blake said, pulling out his wallet. "I'm feeling generous tonight. Let's make this interesting." He counted out $500 bills and placed them on the table. The crisp bills seemed to glow under the chandelier light, and Maya couldn't help but think about how much that money could help her family. It was more than she made in 2 weeks of working all 3 jobs. "Here's the deal," Blake announced, making sure everyone in the nearby area could hear him. "If you can play something recognizable on that piano, and I mean really play it, not just hit some random keys, this $500 is yours." Maya's heart was pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. $500 would cover her mother's medicine for 2 months. It would help with David's textbook expenses. It would mean she could finally fix the leak in their apartment ceiling that had been getting worse every time it rained. "But," Blake continued, his voice dripping with false sweetness, "if you can't play, and I mean really play, then you have to admit, right here in front of everyone, that you're just a server with big dreams and no talent." The restaurant had gone completely quiet now. Even the kitchen staff had stopped what they were doing to listen. Maya felt like she was standing in a spotlight with everyone waiting to see what she would do. Her hands were shaking and she could barely catch her breath. Blake's friends were grinning, clearly enjoying the show. They whispered among themselves, making bets on what would happen next. One of them pulled out his phone, probably getting ready to record whatever happened for social media. "What's wrong?" Blake taunted. "Not so confident now? Come on, it's easy money. Just go over there and play Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star or whatever it is you think you can play." Maya looked around the restaurant at all the faces staring at She saw sympathy in some eyes, curiosity in others, and cruel amusement in Blake's group. The piano sat in the corner like a beautiful, intimidating challenge. She hadn't played in years. Not since her father died and they had to sell their old upright piano. Her manager Tony appeared at her side, his face red with anger. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to lower your voice. You're disturbing our other guests." "Oh, come on," Blake said, waving Tony away. "We're just having some fun. Your server here thinks she can play piano. I'm just giving her a chance to prove it." Maya's mind was racing. Part of her wanted to walk away, to pretend this wasn't happening. But another part of her, the part that remembered the feeling of music flowing through her fingers, was curious. Could she still play? Had she lost everything she'd worked so hard to learn? The $500 sat on the table like a promise and a threat. Maya thought about her mother's medical bills, about David's education, about all the sacrifices her family had made. She thought about her father, who had been so proud when she played for him, and about the dreams she'd had to give up. The entire restaurant waited in silence, holding their breath to see what the quiet server would do next. Maya stood frozen in the middle of the restaurant, feeling like the whole world was watching her. The silence was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Her heart was beating so fast she thought it might burst out of her chest. The $500 on Blake's table seemed to glow under the chandelier lights, calling to her like a lifeline for her struggling family. "Well," Blake said, leaning back in his chair with a smug smile, "are you going to take the challenge or not? We don't have all night." Maya's hands were trembling so badly she had to clasp them together to hide it. She looked around the restaurant at all the faces staring at her. Some people looked embarrassed for her. Others seemed curious about what would happen next. A few diners had even pulled out their phones, ready to record whatever was about to unfold. She thought about her mother at home, probably lying in bed wondering if she'd taken her medicine correctly. Maya had been rushing around so much lately that she hadn't been able to spend quality time with her. The medical bills kept piling up, and every month it got harder to make ends meet. $500 would be a blessing from heaven. Then she thought about David, staying up late studying for his medical school exams. He worked so hard, just like she did, and he never complained about their situation. He was going to be a doctor someday, going to help people and make their father proud. But the tuition costs were crushing them all. "I'm waiting," Blake said, tapping his fingers on the table. "Or maybe you're finally ready to admit that you're just a server with big dreams." Maya's cheeks burned with shame and anger. She wanted to tell him about her years of training, about the competitions she'd won, about how music had once been her whole life. But she also knew that anything she said would just give him more ammunition to mock her. Tony, her manager, stepped closer to her. "Maya, you don't have to do this," he whispered. "I can ask them to leave." But Maya knew that wasn't really an option. Blake and his friends were spending serious money tonight, and Milano's couldn't afford to lose customers like that. Tony was trying to protect her, but she could see the worry in his eyes. He was caught between wanting to help his employee and needing to keep his business running. Maya took a deep breath and looked over at the piano. The beautiful black Steinway sat in the corner like an old friend she hadn't seen in years. She remembered the first time she'd ever seen a grand piano like that. She was 12 years old, and her piano teacher had taken her to a concert at the local college. Maya had been mesmerized by the way the pianist's fingers flew across the keys, creating magic that filled the entire auditorium. "That could be you someday," her teacher had whispered to her. "If you keep working hard and never give up." Maya had believed her back then. She'd practiced for hours every day, dreaming of the day when she'd sit at a grand piano and play for audiences who would appreciate her music. She'd imagined herself at Carnegie Hall, at Lincoln Center, at all the famous venues where the world's greatest musicians performed, but that was before life got in the way. Before her father's accident, before the medical bills, before she had to become the adult in the family overnight. Before she had to sell her beloved piano and put away her dreams forever. "Tick-tock," Blake said, looking at his expensive watch. Make a decision, either play or admit you can't. Maya's legs felt like jelly as she started walking toward the piano. Each step felt like it took forever, and she could hear her own heartbeat in her ears. The other diners watched her every move, and she could feel their eyes burning into her back. Some of them were probably hoping she'd succeed, but others might be curious to see her fail when she reached the piano bench. Maya's hands were shaking so badly she could barely lift the lid that covered the keys. The piano was even more beautiful. Up close, the black surface was polished to a mirror shine, and she could see her own reflection looking back at her. The keys were pristine white and black, arranged in perfect order just like she remembered. Maya sat down on the bench and immediately felt a rush of memories. The height was different from her old, upright piano, and the bench was more comfortable than the rickety stool she'd used for years. But the feeling of sitting at a piano was like coming home after a long journey. She placed her hands on the keys but didn't press down yet. Her fingers remembered the position, curved just slightly, wrists relaxed, shoulders loose. Mrs. Chun, her old piano teacher, had drilled proper posture into her for years. "Your body is part of the instrument," she used to say. "If you're tense, the music will be tense too." Maya could hear Blake and his friends whispering behind her, probably making jokes about what was about to happen. She tried to block them out and focus on the piano. The keys felt cool under her fingertips, and she could almost hear the music waiting to be released, but then panic set in. What if she really couldn't play anymore? What if her years of training had faded away like a dream? What if her fingers had forgotten how to move, how to find the right keys, how to create the magic she'd once taken for granted? She hadn't played a real piano in over 6 years. The last time had been at her father's funeral when she'd played his favorite hymn at the service. After that, they'd sold their piano to help pay for medical expenses, and Maya had never touched another keyboard since then. What if Blake was right? What if she really was just a server with impossible dreams? Maya closed her eyes and tried to remember what it felt like to play. She thought about her father, who used to sit in his old armchair and listen to her practice every evening after work. His face would light up whenever she played, and he'd always clap enthusiastically when she finished a piece. "You've got something special, sweetheart," he used to tell her. "Music is in your soul, not just your fingers. Don't ever let anyone tell you different." Maya took a deep breath and let her fingers find the keys. She decided to start with something simple, a piece she'd learned when she was 15 and had played hundreds of times. Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. It was beautiful and challenging, but not so difficult that she'd embarrass herself if her skills had gotten rusty. The first note rang out clear and pure, echoing through the silent restaurant. Maya felt a shock of recognition run through her body. She remembered this feeling, this connection between her heart and the music. It was like riding a bicycle. Her fingers seemed to remember exactly where to go, but she'd only played one note. The real test was still coming. Could she play the entire piece? Could she remember all the complex passages and delicate timing that made Chopin so beautiful and so challenging? The restaurant held its breath, waiting to see what would happen. Next, Maya's fingers hovered over the keys, ready to either create something magical or fall flat on her face in front of everyone. This was the moment of truth. Maya's fingers touched the keys again, and this time she pressed down gently. The second note joined the first, creating a harmony that seemed to float through the air like a whisper. She felt something click inside her brain, like a door opening to a room she'd kept locked for years. Her muscle memory was still there, waiting patiently for her to return. The opening phrase of Chopin's Nocturne began to flow from the piano, each note perfectly placed and timed. Maya's left hand found the bass notes while her right hand danced through the melody. It was like greeting an old friend after years apart, familiar, comfortable, and filled with emotion. Behind her, she could hear Blake's confident chuckling stop abruptly. The sound was replaced by stunned silence as Maya's playing grew stronger and more confident with each passing measure. What had started as a simple melody was transforming into something much more complex and beautiful. Maya's Eyes were still closed, but she could feel the attention of everyone in the restaurant focusing on her like a spotlight. The usual dinner conversation had stopped completely. Even the kitchen staff had paused their work to listen. The only sounds in the entire restaurant were the gentle notes flowing from the piano and the soft whisper of the air conditioning. As Maya continued playing, her confidence grew. Her fingers remembered exactly where to go, how much pressure to apply, how to make the piano sing the way she wanted it to. The years of training came flooding back, all those hours of practice, all those lessons with Mrs. Chun, all those competitions, where she'd performed in front of judges and audiences. The piece was coming alive under her hands. Chopin's Nocturne wasn't just a collection of notes anymore. It was a story being told through music. Maya could feel the emotion in every phrase, the longing and beauty that the composer had poured into his work over 150 years ago. She was no longer just playing the piano, she was speaking a language that everyone could understand, even if they'd never heard it before. Her left hand carried the steady rhythm while her right hand explored the delicate melody. The music swelled and receded like ocean waves, sometimes gentle and soft, sometimes powerful and commanding. Maya's whole body was involved now, swaying slightly with the rhythm, her shoulders relaxed. Her breathing steady and calm. She could hear someone behind her gasp softly. When she reached one of the more challenging passages, her right hand had to stretch across several octaves while maintaining the flowing melody, and she executed it flawlessly. It was a technique that took years to master, and she was pulling it off like she'd been practicing every day. Maya opened her eyes for just a moment and saw her reflection in the piano's polished surface. But instead of seeing the tired server who'd walked into work that evening, she saw the musician she'd always been inside. Her face was peaceful and focused, her hands moving with the grace and precision of someone who truly understood the instrument. The restaurant had become completely still. She could sense that people had stopped eating, stopped drinking, stopped everything to listen to her performance. Even the staff members who'd been rushing around serving tables were standing motionless, captivated by what they were hearing. Blake's table was the quietest of all. Mayo couldn't see them, but she could feel their shock radiating across the room. The man who'd been so confident that she couldn't play was now witnessing something he'd never expected. His cruel bet was backfiring in the most spectacular way possible. As Maya moved into the middle section of the piece, the music became even more complex and emotional. This was where Chopin really showed his genius, the way he could make the piano sound like it was singing, like it was telling a story that went straight to your heart. Maya's playing captured every nuance, every subtle change in dynamics and tempo. She thought about her father as she played, remembering how he used to close his eyes and smile when she practiced at home. He'd always said that music was the language of the soul, and now Maya understood what he meant. She wasn't just playing notes on a keyboard, she was sharing a piece of her heart. With everyone in the room, the technical challenges of the piece didn't faze her at all. Her fingers flew across the keys with perfect accuracy, hitting complex chord progressions and rapid runs that would have been impossible for someone without serious training. Every note was clean and clear, every phrase perfectly shaped and timed. Maya could feel the energy in the room changing. What had started as a cruel joke was turning into something magical. People weren't just listening anymore, they were experiencing something special, something that would stay with them long after they left the restaurant. A server from another section had quietly moved closer to listen, her eyes wide with amazement. Two businessmen at a nearby table had completely forgotten about their conversation and were staring at Maya with expressions of pure wonder. Even the hostess had abandoned her station to witness what was happening. The music continued to build, reaching toward the emotional climax of the piece. Maya's playing was becoming more passionate now, more expressive. She wasn't holding back anymore. She was letting all her years of training and love for music pour out through her fingers. This was what she'd been born to do, what she'd dreamed of doing on stages around the world. Blake's friends were whispering among themselves, but their voices were hushed and respectful now. The mocking laughter had disappeared completely, replaced by genuine amazement. One of them was recording with his phone, but not to make fun of Maya. He was capturing something beautiful that he knew people would want to see. As Maya approached the final section of the piece, she could feel tears starting to form in her eyes. This music brought back so many memories: her father's proud smile, her teacher's encouragement, the dreams she'd once held so close to her heart. For these few minutes, she wasn't thinking about medical bills or rent money or working 3 jobs. She was just a musician, sharing her gift with the world. The last few phrases of the nocturne were the most delicate and beautiful. Maya's touch became impossibly light, each note floating through the air like a gentle breeze. The melody seemed to hover in the silence, suspended between heaven and earth. Before finally coming to rest on the final chord, Maya held that last note for just the right amount of time, letting it ring through the restaurant before slowly lifting her hands from the keys. The silence that followed was different from the silence that had come before. It was full of wonder and respect, the kind of quiet that follows something truly extraordinary. For a moment, nobody moved. Maya sat at the piano bench, her hands still poised above the keys, hardly believing what had just happened. She had done it. She had played one of the most beautiful pieces ever written, and she had played it perfectly. Then slowly the applause began. The applause started slowly, like raindrops beginning to fall. One person clapped, then another, and suddenly the entire restaurant erupted in thunderous appreciation. Maya sat at the piano bench, hardly believing what was happening. Her hands were still trembling, but now it was from excitement rather than fear. She turned around to face the dining room, and what she saw took her breath away. Every single person in the restaurant was on their feet, clapping with genuine enthusiasm. Their faces showed pure amazement and respect. These were people who had watched her serve their tables for 2 years, barely noticing her existence, and now they were looking at her like she was a completely different person. Blake's table was the most shocking sight of all. The man who had been so cruel and confident just minutes earlier was standing with his mouth hanging open, his face pale with embarrassment. His friends looked equally stunned, their earlier laughter replaced by awkward silence. Blake's expensive suit suddenly didn't make him look powerful anymore. It just made him look like a bully who had been caught in the act. Maya stood up from the piano bench, her legs still shaky from the adrenaline. The applause continued for what felt like forever, and she could see people wiping tears from their eyes. A well-dressed woman at table 12 was crying openly, her mascara running down her cheeks. An older gentleman near the bar was shaking, his head in disbelief, as if he couldn't process what he'd just witnessed. Tony, her manager, was the first to reach her. His eyes were bright with emotion, and he was grinning from ear to ear. "Maya," he said, his voice thick with pride. "In 20 years of running this restaurant, I've never seen anything like that. You're incredible." But before Maya could respond, Blake appeared beside them. His face was red with embarrassment, and he couldn't meet her eyes. The $500 was clutched in his sweaty hand, and he held it out to her without saying a word. I was wrong," he finally managed to say, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry. I had no idea you could play like that." Maya looked at the money in his hand, $500 that would help her family so much. But as she reached for it, Blake pulled out his wallet again. With shaking hands, he counted out more bills, another $1,000, then another $500. "This isn't enough," Blake said, his voice getting stronger as he found his courage. "What I did was horrible. I judged you without knowing anything about you. I treated you like you were nothing, and you just showed me something more beautiful than I've ever heard in my life." The crowd around them was getting bigger. Other diners had left their tables to get closer, and Maya could see several people recording with their phones. But she wasn't worried about that anymore. Something had changed inside her during those few minutes at the piano, and she felt different, stronger, more confident, more like herself than she had in years. "Please take this," Blake continued, holding out the $2,000. "It's not about the bet anymore. It's about showing you the respect you deserve. And it's about me trying to make up for being such a terrible person." Maya accepted the money with trembling hands. $2,000 was more than she made in a month at all 3 of her jobs combined. It would cover her mother's medication for half a year. It would help with David's textbooks and school expenses. It would mean she could finally get their apartment's heating fixed before winter came. But the money wasn't the most important thing that happened that night. As Maya stood there surrounded by applauding strangers, she noticed a well-dressed woman approaching her. The woman was probably in her 50s, with silver hair and kind eyes. She was carrying a small business card in her hand. "Excuse me," the woman said, waiting for the crowd to quiet down. "My name is Dr. Rodriguez, and I'm a talent scout for the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. I also teach at the Music Conservatory downtown. What you just played was absolutely extraordinary." Maya's heart nearly stopped. The Chicago Symphony Orchestra was one of the most prestigious orchestras in the world. She'd dreamed of playing with them when she was younger, but it had seemed as impossible as flying to the moon. "I'd like to offer you a scholarship to our conservatory," Dr. Rodriguez continued. "Full tuition, plus a stipend for living expenses. We have a program specifically for talented musicians who need a second chance to pursue their dreams." Maya's eyes filled with tears. I can't," she said, thinking about her mother's medical needs and David's education. "I have responsibilities. My family depends on me." "The scholarship includes a provision for family support," Dr. Rodriguez said gently. "We've helped other students in similar situations. This is what the program was designed for, to make sure that financial hardship doesn't prevent talented people from sharing their gifts with the world." The crowd around them was listening to every word, and Maya could see the excitement in their faces. Tony was nodding enthusiastically, and even Blake was smiling now, looking genuinely happy for her. "There's more," Dr. Rodriguez continued. "I know several people who would love to hire you for private piano lessons. Wealthy families who pay very well for quality instruction. And there are restaurants and hotels that would pay you excellent money to perform dinner music. Your talent could support your family much better than 3 part-time jobs." Maya felt like she was dreaming. After years of struggling and sacrificing, opportunities were suddenly appearing from nowhere. The woman handed her a business card and wrote her personal phone number on the back. "Call me tomorrow," Dr. Rodriguez said. "We'll set up a formal audition, but after what I just heard, I'm confident you'll be accepted. Don't let this gift go to waste." As the crowd began to disperse and people returned to their tables, Maya found herself surrounded by well-wishers. The woman who had been crying earlier hugged her and said the performance was the most beautiful thing she'd ever heard. The older gentleman pressed a $100 tip into her hand. Even other servers from Milano's came over to congratulate her, their faces glowing with pride. One man, a local businessman, asked if she'd be interested in playing at his daughter's wedding. Another woman wanted to hire her for a corporate event. By the end of the evening, Maya had collected business cards from a dozen potential clients, each offering her more money than she'd ever imagined earning from her musical talents. But perhaps the most touching moment came from an unexpected source. Blake approached her one more time before leaving the restaurant. This time he looked directly into her eyes. "I learned something important tonight," he said quietly. "I learned that you should never judge people by their circumstances. You have more talent in your little finger than I have in my entire body, and I almost missed seeing it because I was too arrogant to look past your uniform." He paused, then added, "Thank you for showing me what real class looks like. I hope I can become a better person because of what happened here tonight." 6 months later, Maya was preparing for her debut performance at the prestigious Millennium Park concert series. Her mother's health had improved dramatically thanks to better medical care, and David was thriving in medical school without the constant worry about money. Maya had quit all 3 of her old jobs and was now making a comfortable living as a piano teacher and performer. She still thought about that night at Milano's, when a cruel bet had turned into the opportunity of a lifetime. As she sat at her new piano, a beautiful baby grand that Dr. Rodriguez had helped her purchase, Maya smiled and began to play. The music flowed from her fingers like water, carrying with it all the joy and gratitude she felt for the second chance she'd been given. Sometimes, she realized, the most beautiful melodies come from the most unexpected places. And sometimes all it takes is one moment of courage to change everything.